All right, everyone. Today I wanted to talk about a topic and once again answer a question that I get a lot of on the Twitch live stream, and it has to do with gearing up. And specifically, I wanted to talk about the topic of armor and what armor you're really going to want to go with. And I get a lot of people asking, what should they go for? Should they go for the Dim Tree armor or should they go for the Red Nose armor? And I'll really talk this through, give you guys the detailed explanation here. And this can be a little bit deceiving because technically speaking, the Dim Tree armor is actually the higher tier armor. The game values it higher. It takes more Cron stones to Cron it. It takes more Kaphra stones, etc. Like, it's considered to technically be the higher tier armor, and generally speaking, the actual item effect as well is going to be more preferential to the Red Nose. You can see that the Dim Tree gives you that maximum HP, whereas the Red Nose, if you take a look at this, it just gives you that HP recovery. Most people are, of course, if they had to choose between those two, they would want to end up picking the maximum HP and not the HP recovery. And even though the Dim Tree is technically considered the higher tier armor, it's really the Red Nose that you should be considering here. And you'll actually see in the market, based on our prices as well, you can see that there's more demand for the Red Nose, and the prices are actually higher, even though it's technically a lower tier armor. You can see them listed here at about 17.3, and if you look at the Dim Tree, you'll see them here that they're actually listed for 17 and even under 17. Now, what is the reasoning behind this? If the Dim Tree is technically the higher tier armor, it's got the more preferential stats, what does that have to do with people wanting the opposite? Well, it's going to be because eventually what you're going to actually do is, no matter what armor you use, you're going to end up turning it into the Fallen God armor, this one right here. And it doesn't actually matter whether you go with the Dim Tree or the Red Nose. Eventually, they both become the same armor, the Fallen God armor. And the reason why you want to go with the Red Nose is actually that crazy thing that I mentioned about it being a lower tier armor. That's actually going to do you a favor when it comes to exchanging it for your Fallen God, because the game actually values a Red Nose less than it values a Dim Tree. It takes less Cron stones, for example, but also very, very importantly is it's going to take less Kaphra stones as well. Now, when it comes to Fallen God, in order to exchange your armor for Fallen God, what you're going to need to do is you're going to need to end up getting it to Kaphras level 10. And you can see here all the different requirements in order to get various pieces of gear to Kaphras levels. And I just want to show you guys the difference here between Red Nose and Dim Tree, because the game values that Red Nose as a lower tier. It's actually going to take less Kaphra stones in order to get it to Kaphras 10, which is going to be the point that you're going to be able to turn it into your Fallen God armor. So let's actually go back to this chart right here. And if you take a look and see, we're in the pen equipment here. You can see all the different stuff, the main hands, the awakening. I'll actually just link this if you guys want to take a look at it a bit more in detail on your own. But it's not until we actually get down here. You'll see the boss armor. That's going to end up being the Red Nose, because you can see right below it, it actually has Dim Tree here in its own separate category for a very important reason, because they do end up taking different amounts of Kaphra stones. So if we go to the boss armor, in order to exchange it for Fallen God, you're going to need to eventually end up bringing it up to Kaphras level 10. Obviously pen as well. So that's a pretty big investment. This is pretty long-term down the road. But, you know, eventually you're probably going to want to think about turning it into the absolute best possible armor, which is going to be that Fallen God. Most people really like to think of their goals as what is their final goals going to be for their gear, not necessarily what's going to be in the lower or the middle step. But that's an important point that I'll bring up in a little bit here, why I mentioned that. So if we end up going to the boss armor, Kaphras level 10, you can see here the cumulative amount of Kaphra stones that it's going to end up taking is 7,224 for the Red Nose, which is the lower tier armor. And now if we go and we take a look at Dim Tree, the exact same thing. If we go to Kaphras level 10, you can see here that the cumulative amount of Kaphra stones is now 8,260. So that's a reasonable difference there. You can go back to this one, 7,224, 8,260. Basically, that's a 1,000 Kaphra stone difference. And that means that because the game actually values Dimtree as a higher tier armor, it takes more Caphras stones to get it to the same Caphras level. And the end result is it's going to take you an extra 1,000 Caphras stones in order to get it to C10 to turn into a fallen god for what is ultimately going to end up being the exact same result. At the end of the day, for your end game gearing goals, you're going to end up getting the same piece of fallen god armor regardless. It doesn't matter whether you turn in a red nose, a Dimtree. You could even turn in a Pen Black Star armor, although that one I would definitely not recommend. Like either way, no matter which of these options you turn in for your fallen god, you're going to end up with the same piece of fallen god armor nonetheless. So the reason why a lot of people go with the red nose is because the game does value it as lower tier. It takes less Caphras stones, and basically you're going for the same result at the end of the day. You might as well save yourself 1,000 Caphras stones and several billion silver. So, 1,000 Caphras is not nothing. That's going to end up being, obviously on your server, in your market, anywhere from 2.5 to 3 or so billion silver that you save by going with the red nose. So even though technically, if you take a look at the market right now, you'll see that red noses might actually be like a couple 100 million silver more. Well, if you're going for that end game fallen god, you're going to end up saving a lot more than the couple 100 million extra that you spend buying a red nose right here. So now the whole point that I brought up about middling tier, right? Like a lot of people really think of their goals as like end game goals. Like eventually you're going to end up using fallen god armor, but what about all the time in between, right? Now, this is a really important thing that I want to mention here. And now that I really brought out all the information behind why a lot of people go with red nose for their armor choice instead of Dimtree, you do have to spend a decent amount of time using a red nose instead of using a Dimtree, where of course you're going to end up not having that additional HP. So keep in mind that because red nose is lower tier, it has that much less preferential item effect of HP recovery instead of the maximum HP. And technically, like in that middling process, until you end up turning in your armor for fallen god, you're going to have a slightly worse armor. And if that's something that's going to really bother you, you have to make that decision. Like, is that going to be a 3 billion difference for you? Is that extra, extra HP on a Dimtree for however long a time period that you're going to use it for before you turn it into a fallen god? Is that going to be worth 3 billion extra silver to you? Most people would say no, it's not really going to be worth it, because at the end of the day, you're going to be turning it into a fallen god regardless. But I don't know, maybe if you feel like you're just going to have the armor forever anyway, then if you never feel like you're going to get fallen god, you're never going to go for it. For some reason, maybe you decide against it. I don't know why, but it is the end game goal really is that fallen god. But for some reason, if you feel like you're going to get 3 billion value out of using a Dimtree and getting that extra HP instead of a red nose, that's going to be up to you. But definitely the conventional choice that a lot of people go with these days is picking the red nose to save, 2.5 to 3 billion silver on those Caphras levels. So really big question, of course, when seasons are out. This question gets asked a lot more because a lot of people have that choice of converting their Tuvala gear into Dimtree, and a lot of times streamers will be going out there and saying they recommend against it, because if you do that and you take it to pen, you're going to spend an extra 3 billion silver turning it into a fallen god. But nonetheless, this is definitely a big thing that people ask when it comes to endgame gearing, and I wanted to give you guys this info so you're aware. With that being said, that's going to be about it for the video. I hope that you guys enjoyed. I hope that this helped out. If it did, and you guys are interested in more videos in the future, consider subscribing to the channel. Feel free to toss a quick like as well. If you have any questions, comments, feel free to leave them below. I try my best to read everything and respond to as much as I can. And of course, if you really want to watch the Twitch stream, that's the best place to ask questions and whatnot there. I'm definitely able to reply a lot more, where I do a whole bunch of enhancing basically every single day, all day, nonstop, 10, 20, 30 billion of enhancing all the time. We blew up a lot of TED accessories the other day. It was not the best luck for us, unfortunately, but that's okay. I hope that you guys are all having a great time nonetheless. And until next time, everyone, take care.